The champagne flute slipped from my fingers with deliberate precision. Time slowed as amber liquid arced through the air, catching the light from the chandelier in 1,000 golden fragments before splashing across the marble floor. In the fractional silence that followed, I watched my husband Marcus's face transform from flirtatious charm to horror as he registered what was happening. Across from him, Camille, his boss and the woman whose hand he'd been touching moments before, was still laughing at whatever whispered joke they'd been sharing, unaware of the catastrophe about to unfold. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," I exclaimed with theatrical concern, my voice carrying just loud enough to turn heads throughout the elegantly appointed living room. Marcus lunged forward instinctively, perhaps to catch a glass that had already shattered, perhaps to stop what he knew was coming next. His Italian leather shoes hit the champagne slick. Physics did the rest. He collided with Camille in a tangle of expensive fabric and flailing limbs. Together, they crashed to the floor in front of Chicago's most influential architectural circle. Colleagues, competitors, and potential clients all gathered in Camille's Lakeshore Drive penthouse. The room fell silent. Someone gasped. I stood perfectly still, my empty hand still curved as if holding the phantom glass, watching my husband and his boss sprawled at my feet. "Eleanor," Marcus whispered, his voice a mix of pain and betrayal as he looked up at me. I smiled, sweet as antifreeze. "Let me help you up, darling." 6 months earlier. It's the Webster Tower Commission. This could change everything for us. Marcus paced our kitchen, suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. I watched him from the breakfast bar, nursing a cup of tea gone cold hours ago. It was nearly midnight, and he'd just returned from the office. "For us?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Or for you?" He stopped pacing and leveled his gaze at me. In the 7 years we'd been married, I'd memorized every plane of his face. The sharp angle of his jaw that softened when he laughed. The perpetual furrow between dark brows that deepened when he was thinking. The hazel eyes that could spark with ambition or warm with tenderness depending on which version of my husband was present. Tonight, it was ambitious Marcus who stood before me. The version I was seeing more and more frequently since Thornhill and Associates had promoted Camille Devereaux to design director, and she'd taken a special interest in my husband's career. "Don't start." "Eleanor," he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "You know what I mean. This commission would mean financial security, recognition in the industry. I could finally make partner." I set my mug down with careful precision. "And all you have to do is work 80-hour weeks and miss our anniversary dinner." Again, the furrow deepened. "That's not fair. Camille needed the preliminary sketches tonight for the client meeting tomorrow. The timing wasn't my choice. Camille. The name tasted bitter on my tongue. Of course. She's my boss, Elle, who calls you at all hours and texts you on weekends. Because she believes in me. Because she thinks I have potential." His voice rose, filling our modestly stylish condo with frustration. "Do you know how rare that is? To have someone at her level champion your work?" I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the familiar argument. "I believe in you too, Marcus. I always have. But lately, it feels like that's not enough." His expression softened as he closed the distance between us. "Hey." He took my hands in his touch achingly familiar. "You're everything to me. You know that. This is just a crazy period. Once we land Webster Tower, things will calm down." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to melt into the warmth of his embrace like I always had. But something hard and cold had taken root in my chest. A certainty I couldn't name yet. "Promise?" I asked, hating the vulnerability in my voice. "Promise," he whispered, pressing his forehead to mine. "It's you and me, Elle. Always has been." I nodded against him, not trusting myself to speak. In the silence, my phone buzzed on the counter. We both glanced over at the screen. "Nina. How's my favorite photographer? Still on for coffee tomorrow?" A small smile tugged at my lips. Nina Reeves had been my best friend since college, the sister I never had. When Marcus's career had necessitated our move to Chicago from Boston 3 years ago, Leaving behind my established photography studio and client base, Nina had been my lifeline. She'd introduced me to her network, helped me build a new portfolio specializing in architectural photography, and never failed to call me out when I was being too accommodating of Marcus's increasingly demanding schedule. "You should go," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "I know you've been cooped up in the studio all week." The studio was a generous term for the converted second bedroom, where I'd been editing a commercial shoot for a real estate developer. Not the artistic work I longed to do, but it paid well. Between Marcus's architect salary and my commercial photography, we were comfortable, if not quite as successful as we'd planned to be by 35. "Maybe I will," I said, pulling away slightly. "Nina's been wanting to introduce me to a gallery owner who's looking for new urban landscape work." Interest flickered in Marcus's eyes. "That's great, Elle. Your cityscapes are incredible. You should show them the Chicago River series." For a moment, he was the man I'd fallen for in grad school. The one who'd spent hours helping me hang my first gallery show, who understood my need to create beauty as deeply as I understood his drive to design spaces that would outlive us both. "You think?" I asked, warmth spreading through my chest. "Absolutely," he said with conviction. "You're brilliant, Eleanor Foster. The world just hasn't figured it out yet." I kissed him then, tasting coffee and the faint mint of toothpaste he kept in his desk drawer. When we broke apart, he rested his hands on my waist. "I'm sorry about our anniversary," he murmured. "I'll make it up to you." "It's okay," I lied. "There's always next year." His phone buzzed in his pocket. I felt him tense, saw the flicker of something. Guilt? Anticipation? Cross his face before he could mask it. "You should get that," I said, stepping back. "It might be important." Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his phone. His face remained carefully neutral as he read the message. "Camille?" I asked, knowing the answer. He nodded. "She has some notes on the presentation." "At midnight?" "The client is international." "Time zones." He was already typing a response, his focus shifting away from me like a door slowly closing. I watched him for a moment. This man I'd built my life around, and wondered when exactly we'd started drifting apart. Was it when we moved to Chicago for his career opportunity? When my photography shifted from passion to profession? Or was it more recent, when Camille Devereux had swept into our lives with her perfect suits and steel-trap mind, seeing in Marcus what I'd always seen? Brilliance waiting to be unleashed? "I'm going to bed," I said quietly. "Don't stay up too late." He nodded absently, already lost in the glow of his screen. I left him standing in our kitchen, the distance between us measured not in feet, but in all the things we were no longer saying to each other. The Thornhill and A. Associates' office occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming downtown tower, one of those steel and glass monuments to capitalism that Marcus both admired and critiqued. I'd been there only a handful of times, usually for holiday parties or client events where spouses were trotted out like accessories. Today, however, I was here professionally. "Eleanor!" What a lovely surprise. Camille Devereux emerged from a conference room, elegant in a charcoal pencil skirt and ivory blouse, her dark hair swept into a sleek bun that emphasized her striking bone structure. At 42, she radiated the polished confidence that came from years of commanding rooms full of men who underestimated her. I adjusted my camera bag on my shoulder, straightening to my full height, which still left me a few inches shorter than Camille in her heels. "Hi, Camille. I'm here for the Webster Tower model shoot." I gestured to the equipment. "Marketing asked me to document the preliminary model for the client presentation." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Of course. Marcus mentioned you were taking on more architectural work. How wonderful that Thornhill can support family talent." The condescension was so artfully delivered I almost missed it. Almost. "I work with several firms," I said evenly, "but Thornhill's models are particularly photogenic." She laughed, a musical sound that carried through the open office. Several heads turned, including my husband's. He was coming out of his office, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, casual in a way that spoke of long hours and deep focus. He stopped short when he saw me, surprise and something else flickering across his face. "Eleanor," he said, crossing to us. "I didn't know you were shooting today." "Last-minute booking," I explained. "The regular photographer had an emergency." Camille placed a hand on Marcus's arm, the gesture casual but lingering. "Well, aren't we lucky? Now Marcus can oversee the shoot personally. He's been living and breathing Webster Tower for weeks." "We all have," Marcus added, a strange emphasis on the "we" that made me glance between them. "Marcus has been absolutely instrumental," Camille continued, her dark eyes warming as she looked at my husband. "He had this brilliant insight about cantilevering the east wing to maximize the river views. Completely transformed the design." Pride and something possessive flashed across her face, the look of someone investing in an asset they expected returns from. "Is that so?" I murmured, studying my husband's reaction. He seemed both pleased and uncomfortable with Camille's praise, a slight flush creeping up his neck. "Eleanor knows all about my cantilever obsession," he said with a forced laugh. "I've been boring her with structural theory for years." "Hardly boring," I countered, memories surfacing of late nights in our Boston apartment. Marcus explaining his designs with passionate gestures, me capturing his enthusiasm in black and white. When had those conversations stopped? Camille's phone chimed. She checked it, her expression shifting to professional concern. "I need to take this. Marcus, why don't you show Eleanor to the model room? Make sure she gets everything she needs." She squeezed his arm before departing, her heels clicking purposefully across the hardwood floor. Alone with my husband, I raised an eyebrow. "She's very hands-on." "She's a mentor," Marcus replied, too quickly. "Come on, the model's this way." I followed him through the sleek office, noting how comfortably he navigated the space, how naturally he belonged in this world of glass and steel and ambition. The model room was a large, well-lit space dominated by a central table where a meticulously constructed miniature of Webster Tower stood, a twisting spire of white and silver that seemed to defy gravity. "It's beautiful," I said honestly, circling the table. My photographer's eye immediately began composing shots, finding angles that would capture the building's dramatic lines. Marcus watched me, his expression softening. "Yeah?" "Yeah," I nodded, already unpacking my camera. "You can see your influence in the design." He moved closer, pointing to specific features. The client wanted something iconic but still contextual to the Chicago skyline. We've incorporated these setbacks as a nod to the Art Deco tradition, but with a contemporary twist. For the next hour, we fell into a familiar rhythm, Marcus explaining his vision, me translating it through my lens. It felt like old times, this collaboration of our talents, this shared language of visual storytelling. I found myself relaxing, laughing at his architectural jokes, admiring the passion that still animated him when he talked about his work. "These are going to be fantastic," he said, looking over my shoulder at the preview screen. His breath warmed my neck, his chest close enough to my back that I could feel his heartbeat. "You've always had a way of making buildings look alive." I turned slightly, our faces inches apart. "That's because I see what the architect sees. The potential. The dream behind the structure." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Longing? And for a moment I thought he might kiss me, right there in his professional domain. Then his phone buzzed. The spell broke. He checked the message and straightened, professional Marcus reasserting himself. "Camille needs me for the client call. Will you be okay finishing up here?" And just like that, the distance was back. "Go," I said, turning to my camera. "I know my way out." He hesitated, then leaned down to press a quick kiss to my cheek. "Dinner tonight? I'll be home by 7, I promise." I nodded, not looking up. "Sure." After he left, I continued working, capturing the model from every angle, focusing on the details that would translate his vision to clients who might not see what he saw. As I packed up, I noticed a jacket draped over a chair in the corner, a woman's blazer in deep burgundy. Expensive. Camille's, most likely. An interior pocket peeked open, revealing the edge of a sleek phone. As I moved to leave, it lit up with a notification, the screen visible just enough to read, "Still on for drinks tonight?" Just us this time. And I froze, staring at the message until the screen went dark again. Monsieur Marcus. Just us this time. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. I picked up my camera bag with numb fingers and walked out, the message burning in my mind like an afterimage. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. At 9:30, Marcus texted, "Client dinner running late. Don't wait up." I sat in our dark kitchen for a long time, a glass of wine untouched before me, staring at nothing. He's working late. Again. I stabbed at my salad, appetite gone. Third time this week. Nina studied me across the cafe table, her brow furrowed with concern. At 36, she wore her success comfortably. Creative director for a major advertising agency, divorced but happily dating, and fiercely protective of her friends. "The Webster Tower project?" she asked, sipping her iced coffee. I nodded. "Always. With Camille?" I looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Nina set down her glass carefully. "Nothing specific, just... You've mentioned her a lot lately. She seems very involved with Marcus's work." "She's his boss," I said automatically. The justification I'd been repeating to myself for months. Nina's tone was neutral, but her eyes were not. "And does his boss normally text him at midnight? Or meet him for private drinks?" My fork clattered against the plate. "How did you—" "You mentioned the texts before," she said gently. "And I saw them together last week at Gibson's. It looked intense. Professional, but intense. The restaurant was upscale. Intimate, not where you'd typically take a client or hold a team meeting. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice hollow. Nina reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "Because I wasn't sure what I was seeing, Al. They were talking, that's all. But the way they were leaning in, how focused they were on each other..." She squeezed my hand. "It reminded me of how you two used to look at architecture exhibitions. Complete absorption. The comparison hit like a physical blow." I withdrew my hand. "It's not like that." "Okay," she said simply. "I believe you. But Eleanor, when was the last time Marcus looked at you that way?" I had no answer. Nina sighed, her expression softening. "Look, I'm not saying anything is happening, but I am saying that something has changed between you two. Anyone who knows you can see it. We're just busy," I insisted. "His career is taking off, and I'm trying to rebuild my portfolio here." "You've been just busy for over a year," Nina interrupted. "At some point you have to ask yourself if that's all it is." I pushed my plate away, suddenly claustrophobic. "I should go. I have an editing deadline." Nina didn't try to stop me, but as I gathered my things, she said quietly, "Whatever's happening, Elle, you deserve the truth. And you deserve someone who makes you a priority." I paused, throat tight. What if the truth is that I'm not enough anymore? That his world has outgrown me? Then that's his loss, she replied firmly. But you won't know until you confront it head on. I left the cafe with her words echoing in my mind. The seed of confrontation planted. The Webster Tower celebration was announced via embossed invitation delivered to our condo, a cocktail reception at Camille's Lake Shore. Drive penthouse to mark the official contract signing. Spouses explicitly included. "It's a big deal," Marcus explained, watching me examine the heavy cardstock. "The firm only landed the project because of Thornhill's personal connection to the developer." "James Thornhill and the client are old friends?" Marcus gave a short laugh. "Not James, Camille. The Devereaux and the Websters go way back. Family connections, of course they did. Everything about Camille Devereaux spoke of old money and cultivated influence." "So this is really her victory," I observed, setting the invitation down. "A team victory," Marcus corrected, but his eyes shone with a personal pride that told a different story. "But yes, she was instrumental in getting us in the door. My designs sealed the deal, and now she's hosting the celebration at her home rather than the office." I kept my tone neutral. "Very intimate." Marcus loosened his tie, avoiding my gaze. "It's strategic. The client appreciates the personal touch, and it positions Thornhill as more than just another corporate firm. I'm sure it does. I picked up the invitation again, noting the elegant script. Black tie optional. I'll need to find something appropriate. Wear that blue dress, Marcus suggested, his eyes finally meeting mine. The one from the Boston Architectural Society dinner. You looked stunning. The compliment took me by surprise. It had been months since Marcus had noticed or commented on my appearance. The dress he referred to was years old, from our previous life, but the fact that he remembered it, remembered how I looked in it, sparked a small flame of hope in my chest. It might need altering, I said. That was 3 years ago. He crossed to me, placing his hands on my waist, his touch warm through my sweater. You're perfect exactly as you are, Elle. For a moment, we stood there in our kitchen, the ghost of our younger selves hovering between us. I wanted to believe this moment was real, that we could find our way back to each other. I miss you, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. Confusion flickered across his face. I'm right here, but he wasn't, not really. And the fact that he didn't understand what I meant only proved it. I stepped back, breaking contact. The party's next Saturday? He nodded the moment lost. 8 o'clock. We should arrive by 8:30. Fashionably late, but not disrespectful. I'll be ready, I promised, already planning what I would wear. But not the blue dress. Something new. Something he hadn't seen before. Something that would make both Marcus and Camille Devereaux take notice. Nina helped me select the dress. A sleek, backless number in deep emerald that made my auburn hair glow like fire and emphasized the green in my hazel eyes. More daring than my usual style, but still elegant. If this doesn't remind him what he has at home, nothing will, Nina declared as we stood in the boutique dressing room. Though personally, I think you should wear it to divorce court. I shot her a look through the mirror. I'm not filing for divorce. Not yet, she muttered, then raised her hands in surrender at my glare. Sorry, I just hate seeing you twist yourself into knots over whether your husband is cheating when you could just ask him outright. I don't have proof, I said, smoothing the silk over my hips. Just suspicions, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is just work, Nina sighed, coming to stand beside me. Elle, I adore you, but this willful blindness isn't doing you any favors. Even if nothing physical has happened, something is going on between them. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I stared at my reflection, at the woman in the stunning dress with uncertainty in her eyes. I'm going to this party. I'm going to watch them together, in their natural habitat. And then I'll know. And then? Nina pressed. Then I'll decide, I said firmly. But whatever happens, I want to look amazing while it's happening. She laughed, squeezing my shoulder. Mission accomplished then. You're going to burn the place down. The night of the party, Marcus and I moved through our condo like dancers in separate routines, sharing the same space but rarely making contact. He was preoccupied, checking his phone repeatedly, adjusting his tie in the mirror with nervous precision. Big night, I commented, applying a final touch of lipstick. Nervous? He glanced at me in the bathroom mirror. A little. The Webster family will all be there. And some press. Architectural Digest is doing a feature. You'll charm them, I assured him, capping my lipstick. You always do. He turned then, really seeing me for the first time that evening. His eyes widened as they traveled from my face down the length of the emerald dress to the strappy heels that made my legs look endless. Elle, he breathed. You look incredible. For a moment, he was my Marcus again. The man who'd proposed to me on a rooftop garden in Boston, who'd vowed to build a life with me as solid and beautiful as the structures he designed. I stepped closer, straightening his already perfect tie. So do you, and he did. Marcus had always worn formal wear with natural grace, his tall frame and broad shoulders perfectly suited to the clean lines of a tuxedo. Tonight, with his dark hair styled just so and a hint of stubble along his jaw, he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. We were a striking couple. We always had been. But somewhere along the way, we'd stopped seeing each other. We should go, he said softly, his hands coming to rest lightly on my hips. The car will be here soon. I nodded, but neither of us moved. We stood there, breathing the same air, teetering on the edge of something. Reconciliation or revelation, I wasn't sure which. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The spell broke. That's probably the car, he said, stepping back to check. It wasn't the car. I could tell by the way his expression shifted, becoming both guarded and energized. Camille. It had to be. We should head down, he said, tucking the phone away. Don't want to be late. As we rode the elevator down to the lobby, I made a decision. Tonight I would know the truth, one way or another. And I would be prepared for either outcome. Camille Devereaux's penthouse was exactly what I'd expected. Spectacular views of Lake Michigan. Minimalist furnishings in cream and charcoal. Strategic pops of color in the form of modern art pieces that probably cost more than our condo. The space was already filled with Chicago's architectural elite when we arrived, the murmur of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter and the gentle clink of glasses. Marcus, Eleanor, welcome. Camille materialized before us, resplendent in a red gown that hugged her slender figure. Her dark hair swept up to reveal diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. She air-kissed my cheek before turning to Marcus, her hand lingering on his arm as she leaned in to whisper something that made him laugh. The Webster family just arrived, she said, including me in the conversation. Marcus, I need you to work your magic. Eleanor, help yourself to champagne. There's an open bar by the windows, and the view is spectacular. Just like that, she swept my husband away, leaving me alone at the periphery of a party celebrating his professional triumph. I watched them cross the room, noting how perfectly they matched each other's pace, how Camille's hand never quite left Marcus's arm, the proprietary way she presented him to the distinguished-looking couple who must be the Websters. Quite the power couple, aren't they? I turned to find a tall, silver-haired man observing me with knowing eyes. He extended a hand. James Thornhill. And you must be Eleanor Foster, Marcus's wife, the photographer, I added, accepting his handshake with a firm grip. He smiled, clearly pleased I'd corrected him. Indeed, I've seen your work. You have an exceptional eye for architectural detail. Thank you, I said, surprised by the recognition. I didn't realize my work had made it to the executive floor. Camille shared your portfolio when we were considering photographers for the Webster project. Your compositions are remarkable. He gestured toward a waiter, procuring 2 champagne flutes and offering me one. Though ultimately, the client preferred someone with a more commercial portfolio. I accepted the champagne, processing this information. Camille showed you my work? She keeps tabs on all the talent in Marcus's orbit, he said mildly, his gaze drifting to where Camille and my husband stood with the clients. She's very thorough that way. Something in his tone made me study him more carefully. James Thornhill had founded the firm 30 years ago and still served as chairman. He would know the internal dynamics better than anyone. Very thorough, I agreed, taking a sip of champagne. And very hands-on with her mentoring. A flash of amusement crossed his face. Is that what they're calling it these days? My heart stuttered. I'm sorry? He seemed to realize he'd overstepped, his expression becoming carefully neutral. Forgive me. I only meant that Camille invests heavily in architects she believes have potential. Marcus is tremendously talented. Yes, he is, I agreed, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. Camille recognized that immediately. She has an eye for opportunities, Thornhill said carefully. Much like yourself, I imagine. Before I could decipher this cryptic comment, he excused himself to greet new arrivals, leaving me with half-empty champagne and fully formed suspicions. For the next hour, I circulated through the party, making small talk with people who knew my husband better than they knew me. I kept Marcus and Camille in my peripheral vision, noting how they were rarely more than a few feet apart, how their eyes sought each other across the room, how their conversation seemed to flow with the ease of private understanding. None of it was damning. All of it was telling, Eleanor, I've been looking for you. Marcus appeared at my elbow, slightly flushed with excitement and perhaps one too many drinks. He looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in months, vibrant, alive with possibility. The Websters love the design, he told me, his eyes bright. They've asked for some minor adjustments to the East Wing, but essentially, it's a go. Can you believe it? Congratulations, I said sincerely. Whatever was happening in our marriage, his professional achievement deserved recognition. I'm proud of you, he beamed, pulling me into a quick embrace that smelled of his cologne and unfamiliar perfume. Camille's, no doubt. They'd been standing close all evening. Come meet the clients, he urged, guiding me through the crowd. Mr. Webster is fascinated by architectural photography. I told him about your Chicago River series. For a moment, I glimpsed the partnership we'd once been. Marcus promoting my work, me supporting his dreams, each of us elevating the other. It felt like an echo from another life. The Websters were gracious, if somewhat distracted by the many people vying for their attention. After brief introductions, Marcus was pulled away by a senior associate with questions about the presentation boards displayed around the room. I found myself at the edge of the party once more, watching the dynamics unfold. Camille dominated the room effortlessly, her laughter carrying over conversations, her presence magnetic. She moved with the confidence of a woman in complete control of her domain, personal and professional boundaries blurred to her. Advantage, I needed air. The penthouse featured a wraparound terrace with breathtaking views of the city. I slipped outside, grateful for the relative quiet and the cool breeze coming off the lake. Chicago sparkled below me, a constellation of lights stretching to the horizon. I'd photographed this skyline dozens of times but never quite captured the feeling of standing above it all. Simultaneously part of and separate from the life pulsing through the city. The glass door slid open behind me. I didn't turn, assuming it was another guest seeking respite from the crowd. There you are, Camille's voice. I steeled myself before turning to face her. Just getting some air, I explained with a smile that felt stiff on my face. Beautiful party. Thank you. She joined me at the railing, her red dress vivid against the night sky. Up close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the subtle signs of age that somehow only enhanced her beauty. Beautiful dress. Thank you, I echoed, unsure where this conversation was heading. She sipped her champagne, studying me over the rim of her glass. You know, Eleanor, I've always admired how supportive you are of Marcus's career. Not all spouses understand the demands of our profession. The late nights? The weekend work? The constant availability? I kept my tone light, conversational. Yes, architecture can be quite demanding, she smiled, a calculated curve of red lips. Precisely. It takes a certain type of person to thrive in this environment. Someone driven, passionate, willing to sacrifice for their vision. She turned to look out at the city. Marcus has that quality. It's rare. It's one of the things I love about him, I said carefully. His passion. Yes. The word hung between us, loaded with unspoken meaning. Passion is essential. In all aspects of life, don't you think? I met her gaze directly. Absolutely. Though sometimes, passion needs boundaries to truly flourish. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise perhaps, that I'd stepped into the subtext rather than shying away from it. Boundaries, she repeated thoughtfully. An interesting concept. In architecture, the most innovative designs often come from pushing boundaries, not respecting them. She set her empty glass on a nearby table. The Webster Tower, for instance, literally cantilevers over existing property lines. The result is breathtaking. But secured through proper channels, I assume, I countered, with agreements in place to protect all parties involved. Her smile tightened. Of course, everything by the book. The glass door slid open again, and Marcus emerged, his eyes finding Camille first, then shifting to me with a flicker of uncertainty. There you both are, he said, crossing to us. Mr. Webster is asking about the structural supports for the cantilevered section. I'll handle it, Camille said, her hand automatically finding his arm. You should enjoy your moment. This is your triumph too, Marcus. The possessive touch, the intimate tone. It wasn't my imagination. Something had changed in the air between us. A tacit acknowledgement of the undercurrents we'd been dancing around. Actually, I interjected, smiling brilliantly at my husband, I was just telling Camille how much I'd love a tour of the rest of the penthouse. The architecture is stunning, Marcus blinked, surprised by my request. Oh, well, I should really get back to the Websters. You absolutely should, I agreed smoothly. Camille can show me around. Right, Camille? It was a challenge, one she couldn't refuse without seeming rude. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her social mask remained firmly in place. Of course, she said graciously. Marcus, go dazzle the clients. Eleanor and I will rejoin you shortly. He hesitated, glancing between us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern? Guilt? Before nodding and returning to the party. Alone again with Camille, I gestured toward the door. Shall we? She led me through the penthouse, pointing out architectural features with professional detachment. The tour was brief, a cursory look at the guest wing and a glimpse of her home office, decorated with framed awards and architectural photographs. Your work is excellent, I commented, studying a black and white image of a spiral staircase. Who's the photographer? A friend, she said dismissively. Now about the Webster Tower. Is that what we're calling it? I interrupted, turning to face her. A friendship? Her expression didn't change, but something hardened in her eyes. I'm not sure I follow. I think you do, I said quietly. Whatever is happening between you and my husband, I see it. For a long moment, she said nothing, measuring me with her gaze. Then she moved to close the office door, shutting us in private. What exactly do you think you see, Eleanor? Her voice was cool, controlled. I see the way you touch him. The private drinks. The midnight texts. The professional mentoring that seems to require an awful lot of one-on-one time. I held her gaze steadily. I see my husband pulling away from me and toward you. She sighed, the sound almost sympathetic. Marriage is complicated. Careers are demanding. Sometimes people grow apart. Is that what you told yourself when you decided to pursue him? That we were already growing apart, so it didn't really matter? I didn't pursue Marcus, she said, her composure perfect. We connected professionally. If that connection has evolved, perhaps you should ask yourself why. The implication stung. And what would I discover, in your expert opinion? She shrugged one elegant shoulder. That ambition requires partnership. That Marcus needs someone who understands his world, who can elevate him professionally as well as personally. Someone like you, I said flatly. Someone who sees his full potential and isn't threatened by it. She crossed to a small bar cart in the corner, pouring herself a finger of amber liquid. Marcus is exceptional, Eleanor. He deserves an exceptional life. And you think I'm holding him back? The audacity of her assessment made my blood boil. You know nothing about our marriage. I know that since joining Thornhill, Marcus has flourished under my guidance, she replied calmly. I know that he works late willingly, eagerly even. I know that when we discuss design concepts, hours pass like minutes. She sipped her drink. And I know that he hasn't mentioned going home to you once during those late nights. Each word was a precision strike, designed to wound. The worst part was I couldn't deny them. Marcus had been pulling away, and I'd been letting him, unsure how to bridge the growing distance. Whatever you think is happening, I said carefully, Marcus and I are still married. We have a history, a foundation. Foundations can be retrofitted, she replied, or demolished entirely, if the structure above requires it. The casual cruelty of the architectural metaphor left me momentarily speechless. Camille took my silence as capitulation. I'm not your enemy, Eleanor, she said, her tone softening. We're both professional women navigating complex situations. I respect your position and your talent. She set down her glass. But you should know that I don't step back from things I want. Ever. Neither do I said, finding my voice. Not when they're worth fighting for. Our eyes locked in silent challenge. In that moment, I saw Camille Devereux clearly, not just as my husband's boss or potential lover, but as a woman who had decided that Marcus belonged in her world, and I did not. "We should get back to the party," she said finally. "People will wonder where we've gone." As we walked back toward the main room, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind all evening. "Are you sleeping with my husband, Camille?" She paused, turning to look at me with perfect composure. "Not yet." The honesty was breathtaking in its arrogance. "But you plan to." "I plan to give him everything he deserves," she replied. "The real question, Eleanor, is whether that includes you." We rejoined the party as if nothing had happened, our private war invisible to the celebrating crowd. I found Marcus deep in conversation with the Websters and several senior architects, his expression animated as he described some aspect of the design. He looked up as we approached, his eyes registering first Camille, then me, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly when I reached his side. "Just getting to know Camille better," I replied, my smile fixed in place. "Your boss is fascinating." His eyes darted between us, sensing the tension but unable to identify its source. Camille smoothly inserted herself into the conversation with the clients, her hand finding Marcus's arm with practiced ease. "Marcus was just explaining the innovative structural support system, weren't you?" He nodded, launching back into his explanation, but I noticed how his eyes kept darting to Camille, seeking her approval, basking in her encouraging nods. It was subtle but unmistakable. The dynamic between them had shifted from mentor-protégé to something more intimate, more possessive. I watched them, this beautiful, ambitious pair, and felt something shift inside me. Not just heartbreak, but clarity. And with clarity came decision. I excused myself to get another drink, making my way to the bar. As I waited, I observed the room, the power dynamics, the social hierarchies, the subtle interplay of professional and personal relationships. This was Marcus's world now. The question was whether it was still mine. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. I took one, sipping slowly as I watched Camille lead Marcus and the Websters toward the display boards. Her hand never left the small of his back, guiding him like a prized possession. Something hot and fierce rose in my chest. Not just jealousy, but indignation. This woman thought she could simply take what was mine, remake my husband in her image, dismantle our marriage through 1,000 small incursions. And Marcus, blinded by ambition and flattery, was letting her. I set down my empty glass and picked up a full one, decision crystallizing into action. I moved through the crowd with purpose, champagne flute in hand, smiling and nodding at faces I recognized but didn't stop to greet. My target was clear. Camille and Marcus, now standing slightly apart from the Websters, heads bent close together in private conversation. As I approached, I caught fragments of their exchange. "Absolutely brilliant presentation," Camille was saying, her voice low and intimate. "You've exceeded even my expectations." "I couldn't have done it without you," Marcus replied, his expression earnest, hungry for her approval. "Your guidance has been everything." "We make an exceptional team," she murmured, her fingers brushing his wrist in a touch too lingering to be merely collegial. In all respects, Marcus didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, drawn into her orbit like a planet unable to resist the gravitational pull of its sun. The sight confirmed everything. The emotional affair, if not yet physical. The betrayal of not just our vows but our partnership. The gradual replacement of me in his life with someone who promised more, who seemed to offer a future brighter than our shared past. I paused, champagne flute gripped tightly in my hand, and considered my options. I could confront them publicly, creating a scene that would damage Marcus's professional reputation. I could wait until we were home and demand the truth. I could simply walk out, filing for divorce without another word, or I could make a statement that required no words at all. I chose the latter. Stepping forward with deliberate grace, I approached the pair just as Camille placed her hand on Marcus's arm, her fingers tracing the fabric of his tuxedo with proprietary ease. "There you are," I said brightly, my voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "I've been looking everywhere for you." They turned simultaneously, their expressions shifting from intimate conspiracy to professional cordiality, with practiced smoothness. But I'd seen the truth in the moment before their masks slid into place. "Eleanor," Marcus began, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. "We were just discussing the final presentation details." "Of course you were," I replied, my smile unwavering. "It's quite the achievement. You both must be very proud." Something in my tone made Camille's eyes narrow slightly, assessing the threat level. "The credit belongs to Marcus and the team," she said smoothly. "I merely facilitated the connection." "So modest," I observed, moving to stand beside my husband. "But we all know how hands-on your mentoring style is, Camille." Marcus tensed beside me, sensing the undercurrents. In fact," I continued, raising my glass, "I'd like to propose a toast. To successful partnerships, in all their forms." Camille's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. How thoughtful. As I raised my glass higher, preparing to deliver the final line of my impromptu toast, I calculated the angle, the distance, the timing. Everything had to be perfect. To boundaries, I said clearly. And what happens when they're crossed? I brought my arm down with deliberate clumsiness, releasing the champagne flute at precisely the right moment. It fell from my fingers with theatrical precision, amber liquid arcing through the air before splashing across the marble floor directly in front of where Marcus and Camille stood. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," I exclaimed with theatrical concern. Marcus lunged forward instinctively, perhaps to catch the glass that had already shattered. His Italian leather shoes hit the champagne slick. Physics did the rest. He collided with Camille in a tangle of expensive fabric and flailing limbs. Together, they crashed to the floor in front of Chicago's most influential architectural circle. Colleagues, competitors, and potential clients, all gathered in Camille's Lakeshore Drive penthouse. The room fell silent. Someone gasped. I stood perfectly still, my empty hand still curved as if holding the phantom glass, watching my husband and his boss sprawled at my feet. "Eleanor," Marcus whispered, his voice a mix of pain and betrayal as he looked up at me. I smiled, sweet as antifreeze. "Let me help you up, darling." As I extended my hand to him, our eyes locked in a moment of perfect understanding. He knew that I knew, and he knew this was no accident. Camille recovered more quickly, her composure reasserting itself despite her disheveled appearance and the growing stain on her red gown. "Someone get a towel," she commanded, her authoritative tone cutting through the shocked silence. Waitstaff materialized with cloths and offers of assistance. The party resumed its rhythm, the incident already transforming into an anecdote that would be shared in professional circles for weeks to come. How Camille Devereaux and her protégé took a tumble at the Webster Tower celebration. Embarrassing, but hardly catastrophic. Except that wasn't the whole story. As Marcus regained his footing, his expression was a complex mixture of anger, shame, and realization. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger, a woman capable of calculated public humiliation, not the supportive wife who had stood in his shadow for years. "We need to talk," he murmured, his voice tight. "Not here," agreed, I replied calmly. "But first I think you should help Camille clean up. She looks like she could use your support." The double meaning wasn't lost on him. His jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly before turning to assist Camille, who was attempting to assess the damage to her dress while maintaining her dignity. I moved toward the terrace, needing air and space. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, the city lights below a constellation of possibilities. I hadn't planned what would come next, only that something had to change. The glass door slid open behind me. Marcus. I knew his footsteps, the rhythm of his breathing, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed now with champagne. What the hell was that? His voice was low, controlled fury vibrating beneath the surface. I turned to face him, my composure intact. That was me refusing to be invisible anymore. By embarrassing me in front of my colleagues? My clients? He ran a hand through his hair, disheveled now from the fall. Do you have any idea what you've done? I have a very clear idea, I replied steadily. The question is, do you? He stared at me, confusion mixing with anger. What are you talking about? I'm talking about you and Camille. I kept my voice even, despite the storm of emotions beneath. I'm talking about late nights and private drinks and midnight texts. I'm talking about how you've been pulling away from me for months while she's been pulling you closer. Marcus paled slightly, guilt flashing across his face before he could mask it. It's not what you think. We work together. She's my boss. Stop lying, I said quietly. Not to me and not to yourself. Something has been happening between you two. Maybe not physically yet, but emotionally. You've already crossed that line. He opened his mouth as if to deny it again, then closed it, the fight draining from him. He moved to the railing, gripping it as he stared out at the city. I didn't mean for it to happen, he finally said, his voice hollow. It just evolved, the late nights working on designs. Her understanding of what drives me creatively, the shared vision. Each word was a knife, but I stood my ground. And what about our shared vision, Marcus? The life we planned together? The partnership we built? He turned to me, his expression pained. It changed, Elle. You changed. I changed. Chicago changed us. No, I said firmly. Chicago didn't change us. Your ambition did. Your willingness to let our marriage become collateral damage in your rise to the top. That's not fair, he protested. I've been working for both of us. For our future. Have you? I challenged. Or have you been working for yourself? For Camille's approval? For a future that might not include me at all? The silence that followed was answer enough. She told me, I said quietly, that she plans to give you everything you deserve. She asked if that includes me. Marcus looked stricken. She said that? Just before I spilled my drink, I confirmed. She was quite clear about her intentions. He closed his eyes briefly, the full complexity of the situation finally dawning on him. Elle, I never meant to hurt you. I got caught up in it all. The project, the recognition, the feeling of finally breaking through professionally. And Camille was right there, offering validation, opening doors, making you feel like the architect you've always wanted to be. I finished for him. He nodded, unable to deny it. But we haven't had sex? I supplied bluntly. That's a remarkably low bar for fidelity, Marcus. He flinched. I know it looks bad. But I swear I never intended to what? Fall for your boss? Jeopardize our marriage? Humiliate me professionally and personally? The calm I'd maintained began to crack. You didn't have to intend any of it. You just had to do nothing to stop it. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the party continuing without us. Chicago spread out below like a witness to our unraveling. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice small. It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks, the one that had led me to this moment of confrontation. Standing here now, facing the ruins of what we'd built, I found I didn't have a simple answer. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know that I won't be the understanding wife who looks the other way while her husband falls for another woman. I won't shrink myself to fit into the corners of your life that Camille hasn't claimed. Marcus winced. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I countered. And the fact that you can't see it only proves how far gone you are. The glass door slid open, interrupting whatever response he might have made. Camille stood framed in the doorway, her composed mask firmly back in place despite the damp stain on her dress. Marcus, the Websters are asking for you, she said smoothly, her eyes flickering briefly to me before returning to him. Something about the structural plans. I laughed, the sound sharp in the night air. Impeccable timing, as always. Camille ignored my comment, her focus entirely on Marcus. This is a critical moment. The clients need reassurance. I watched my husband struggle with the decision, stay and continue this vital conversation with his wife, or return to the professional arena where success and validation awaited. It shouldn't have been a difficult choice. That it clearly was told me everything I needed to know. Go, I said quietly. Your public awaits, he began. We'll finish this at home, I interrupted. Your career comes first. It always has. The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. Marcus looked pained, caught between worlds, but Camille's presence was a gravitational force he couldn't resist. I'll just be a few minutes, he promised, already moving toward the door. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak as I watched him follow Camille inside, their bodies automatically adjusting to move in tandem, a synchronicity born of months of close collaboration. Left alone on the terrace, I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the cold clarity of revelation. Tonight had brought no easy resolutions, no dramatic declarations of renewed devotion. Instead, it had confirmed what I'd suspected but been afraid to face. My marriage was in critical condition, and my husband's heart was divided. The question now was whether either was worth saving. 3 months later, I stood in Nina's gallery, surrounded by large-scale photographs of Chicago architecture. Not the glossy commercial shots I'd been taking to pay bills, but raw, emotionally resonant images that captured the invisible human stories within built environments. They're selling like crazy, Nina informed me, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of wine. The Chicago Tribune critic called your work a revelatory exploration of absence and presence within urban spaces. I accepted the glass, smiling despite myself. Pretentious, but I'll take it. You should, she insisted. This is what you've always been meant to do. Create art that makes people feel something. Around us, the opening night crowd moved from image to image. Photographs of empty corporate lobbies with single chairs askew. Abandoned construction sites with tools left mid-project. Half-demolished buildings revealing ghostly traces of former inhabitants. The centerpiece was a triptych titled Structural Integrity, 3 massive prints showing the Webster Tower construction site at different stages. The final image capturing a worker's hand touching a blueprint, wedding ring visible. It wasn't subtle, but art rarely is when it emerges from personal pain. Have you heard from him? Nina asked quietly, following my gaze to the triptych. I nodded. His lawyer called mine yesterday. He's not contesting anything. The divorce should be finalized next month. She squeezed my arm sympathetically. And Camille? Promoted him to associate director last week. I kept my voice neutral, the sting having faded to a dull ache. They're not hiding their relationship anymore. It's all very professional, I'm sure, Nina snorted. Professional like a shark attack. I smiled despite myself. They make sense together. In a way, I get it. They want the same things, and you don't? I gestured to the gallery around us. I want this. My work, my vision. My life on my terms. I took a sip of wine. I realized something that night at the party. I was so focused on what I was losing that I couldn't see what I might gain by letting go. Before Nina could respond, a tall man in a charcoal suit approached, his expression both intimidated and determined. Ms. Foster? I'm Andrew Merrick from the Museum of Contemporary Art. He extended his hand. Your work is extraordinary. We're curating an exhibition on urban transformation for the spring, and I'd love to discuss including your series. As we talked, I felt a familiar prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. Glancing toward the entrance, I saw him. Marcus stood just inside the door, more hesitant than I'd ever seen him. He looked good, a little thinner perhaps, but well-dressed and groomed as always. Our eyes met across the crowded gallery, and for a moment, everything else faded away. I excused myself from the conversation with Andrew Merrick, promising to call his office next week, and made my way through the crowd. Marcus remained rooted in place, watching my approach with an expression I couldn't quite read. You came, I said simply when I reached him. Nina sent an invitation to the office. He shifted awkwardly. I hope that's okay. I nodded. It's fine. I'm glad you're here. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. 3 months of separation creating a gulf wider than the physical space we maintained. The photographs are incredible. He said finally, genuine admiration in his voice. This is what you've always been meant to do. The echo of Nina's words wasn't lost on me. "Thank you," he gestured to the triptych. I recognized the site immediately. "Webster Tower." "Yes, is it about us?" he asked hesitantly. I considered the question, looking back at the images I'd created. "It's about structures. What makes them stand or fall? What remains when they're gone?" He nodded slowly, understanding the metaphor. "I deserved what you did that night. At the party." "It wasn't about what you deserved," I replied. "It was about what I needed to be seen. To stop being invisible in my own life." Marcus swallowed hard. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. The way things ended. How I handled everything with Camille." I studied him, searching for the man I'd married in the contours of this familiar stranger's face. He was still there, beneath the polished exterior that Chicago and ambition and Camille had helped create. "But he wasn't mine anymore. Are you happy?" I asked, the question simpler than I'd expected it to be. He considered this, his honesty a parting gift. "Professionally? Yes, personally? I'm working on it," he paused. "Camille is complicated." I laughed softly. "I bet she is. And you?" he asked. "Are you happy?" I looked around the gallery, at my work displayed on pristine walls, at the people engaging with images I'd created, at the future unfolding before me, uncertain but entirely mine. "I'm getting there," I answered truthfully. "One frame at a time." He smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the awkwardness. "You're going to be famous, you know. Your eye, your perspective. It's unique. We'll see." I sipped my wine, comfortable in the growing silence between us. "I should go," he said finally. "I just wanted to see the show. And to tell you," he hesitated. "I'm glad you spilled that drink, Elle. We both needed the wake-up call." I nodded, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. "Take care of yourself, Marcus. You too, Eleanor." He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at me one last time. "By the way, Camille slipped on a client's dog's water bowl last week. Fell right on her ass in the middle of a presentation." His eyes twinkled with the shared joke. "I thought you'd appreciate the poetic justice." I laughed, the sound surprising us both with its genuine mirth. The universe has a sense of humor after all. As I watched him walk away, I felt not the searing pain of loss that had characterized the past months, but something lighter. Closure, perhaps. Or maybe just the freedom that comes from finally acknowledging that some structures aren't meant to stand forever, and that's okay. Nina appeared at my side, eyeing Marcus's retreating form. "You all right?" I turned to her, smiling with genuine contentment. "Actually, yes. I really am. Good," she said firmly. "Because that MCA curator is practically salivating over your work, and the Tribune wants an interview for Sunday's arts section." She clinked her glass against mine. "Your new life awaits, Miss Foster, and it looks magnificent." I took one last look at the triptych across the room, the construction site, the blueprint, the wedding ring. A story ending and beginning simultaneously, captured in 3 frames. "You know what?" I said, setting down my empty glass. "I think it does." I moved back into the crowd toward my future, leaving the spillage of my past marriage behind me, not as a stain to be hidden, but as the catalyst that had propelled me forward into a life more authentically my own. Sometimes, it takes a deliberate stumble to find your true balance.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.